like camera-wise.
Good morning, Addison. Yes, if we were just talking about, I need to adjust the settings for the file. If it takes it at too high a resolution, then I can't post it because the file is too many gig or kilo or whatever it is. I don't know. My husband does that. Sorry to miss you. Hope things are okay there in Texas. Okay, so I was just beginning to tell the boys, for your final assignment this last week, just to get used to the idea of doing sort of it says exam, but don't get freaked out by that, okay? First of all, well, I have given you a series of questions. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions, and here's what the instructions say. Choose 4 of the following questions. Choose 4 of the following questions, any 4, and answer on a separate piece of paper as thoroughly as you are able. When you can give specific examples from what we have read this semester, please do so. And then I'll just give you an example. The first question says, how was Greek civilization similar to that of the Romans? How was it different? In which do you think you would rather live and why? Okay, so like that. So it's stuff that ties together things we've talked about. Note, you may look in any book you have at home. This is not closed book. I have to take it out of my brain. However, if you didn't read the stuff along with this, it would be hard to do. Do you know what I mean? It's safe to do that because there's no way you could answer these questions and not have read anything. And I know you read it because I asked you questions about it. So choose 4 of them and just write out. So I told the high schoolers do something similar, and I said you ought to need at least a paragraph to answer well. I can't imagine that you could answer in fewer than 3 or 4 sentences. But if you like the question and you're on a roll, you go for it. You tell me whatever you have to think. You know what? I'm not grading your grammar. I'm not grading your spelling. I want to know what's in your brain. Don't just be free. Just tell me why Greeks or Romans are better and where you'd like to live. And another example. Discuss 4 aspects of Roman life you learned about from the Eagle of the Ninth. Tell me what you learned about Romans from reading that book. Just go for it, okay? And Addison, I will email you. When I email you the link, I guess if you're watching this, I've already emailed you the link to the recording. So I should have emailed you this already. And if you can, that's your only assignment for this week. We're going to read some more, but you have no reading questions. You have no writing. This is the only thing. And if you bring it back to me next week, that would be awesome.
So, okay, like you said, on a separate piece of paper, we answer all the questions.
Do you answer all the questions? What did I say? 4. 4 of the questions. Any 4 that you like the sound of. I mean, if you want to answer all 6 of them, I will not be angry with you as long as you know that you only have to answer 4. One thing that homeschooled kids do not sometimes realize is that following directions is really, really important. And your mom, if you don't follow the directions perfectly, she says, oh, well, that's okay. But in school, they will just reject the paper. So if you bring me 6 questions, I'm going to wonder, did you do that because you just really loved the questions or because you just didn't bother to follow the directions? Anyway, it's one of the dirty, ugly things that it's my job to help homeschool students. And I know this because of my own students, my own kids. I did the same things like, oh, that's okay, honey. Yeah, Colin.
Today is National Star Wars Day. Did you know that?
Oh, yes, it's May the 4th.
And they created that not only because May the 4th being here, but also because it's George Lucas's birthday.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I did not know about George Lucas. My daughter, who is a librarian, sometimes she can't do live programs right now or last year, but before they would have a Star Wars party on May the 4th at the library. Okay, so this week we did some, I don't think we're going to go the whole somehow I feel like we're going to run short today, which is fine. But I had you read about Roman life. Part of it was familiar because I had you write a paper on Roman education. So we talked about that. And part of it was the Roman house. I love the idea. Can you imagine having just an opening in your roof with a pool down below for the rain to fall in? I think we should all start doing that. We should all just cut an opening in the roof and have a pool.
And your roof probably shouldn't be at an angle if you're trying to get water to get in there.
No, this is true. This is true. And Addison, I'm not going to be able to show Addison this very well, but I brought this, the Romans Usborne book, because it has very cool pictures of houses. So Dorothy Mills mentioned this. How do we know so well what Roman houses were like?
Pompeii.
Oh, Pompeii. Pompeii. I mean, we have a lot of people who described Pliny. There were several quotes from Pliny in your book. Remember, I told you that Pliny wrote a lot of letters. Just seriously a lot of letters. And we have a lot of his letters. Do you remember when we talked about Pliny before? What did he witness?
The destruction of Pompeii.
He was across the bay, and his uncle Pliny died trying to help people get away. Yeah, so this Pliny, who wrote so many letters, he also wrote letters about his country estate. And people wrote poems and letters, sometimes humorous poets and things would write about what a bummer it is to live in the city. And somebody said, oh, I live over a bathhouse. You know how sometimes in cities even today, they have apartments over stores and things. And, oh, I live over a bathhouse and I hear these disgusting sounds all day long. And so it's kind of funny. But we have, it's pretty impressive. Here is a picture of a townhouse, and it's got a cutaway. I don't think, Addison, you're not going to be able to see this very well. And here, I'm just going to kind of have to show each of you. Here, I'll be back, Addison. It's kind of cool. Here's the pluvium, the pond, for lack of a better term. And so you come in the front. They have a doorway in the front, but they have a garden area at the back. So from the front, these houses don't look that beautiful, you know. But you go through to the back, and they have their garden in the back. And then Dorothy Mills mentioned heating, keeping it warm. She mentioned those charcoal, you know, like a sort of a portable stove, like a heating unit. But here, look at this. How they might have a fire grate and run warm air through the bottom. So let me bring this down to Colin, because this is just so cool. Here's a picture of a heating system under the floor.
Oh, I learned about this in my other history class. It was like more detailed. It was the way things work. And, it was really cool. Yeah. And
then we've got this you know, where you come in from the front and come into the atrium and everything, but in the back you have their beautiful garden area. One thing that she did not talk about that I love this. They're called insulae. What's an insula? Island. It's an apartment building. It's like a little island of apartments. They actually had apartment buildings in Rome, which seems very modern. You know, if you can't afford your own house. It says some apartments were luxurious and spacious while others were cramped and squalid. Okay, just like today. They could have many rooms or only one. Limits were imposed on the height to which insulae could be built. Normally only 4 or 5 stories allowed. So they had to limit it. That means they could have gone higher if they had wanted to. They had the ability. Why do you think? Can you imagine why they would say they don't want to build them too high?
Maybe because, like, this is my guess, but maybe because if they had like a fire, their hoses probably couldn't reach very far.
Okay, I don't know if they had hoses at all.
I thought I read it.
Maybe they had pipes.
I saw
I
the
don't say-
Usborne thing. They said they used leather.
Oh, okay. That is possible. But even when there's not a disaster, so imagine a street. Okay, you're in a city. Imagine you're sitting on the street, and you're walking down the street, and this street has buildings, and they're all 10 stories high. Tell me about the street.
The street won't have any like sun or anything?
It's very dark. It's very dark, and so when it rains on the street, there's no sun to dry it out. Does that make sense? I have a feeling because of that, and also just the general ambiance, that it would just be really dark and depressing. So they limited how. Oh, here, there's a thing about firefighting down here. We're reading it. Fire was a constant risk in Rome because of the hot, dry climate, the overcrowded conditions, and the use of open fires in wooden buildings, like we saw with their heating system. There were 7 brigades called the Vigiles, watchmen, like we're vigilant, if we're vigilant or keeping a vigil, okay? Each with 1,000 men. The city was divided into 14 regions, and each brigade was responsible for 2 of them. Okay, simple handheld pumps were used to fight small fires, but could only deliver a small amount of water. Sponges and leather buckets were used to dampen undamaged walls to stop the fire from spreading. But there is a little guy here with sort of a hose thing, so it doesn't tell us about that, unfortunately.
Or something?
What?
Do they have like cool outfits or something?
It does not appear that they had cool outfits. Sorry about that. One thing that we've discovered in Pompeii, one of the houses that they've dug up is just very, very posh. And the decorations of these houses, if you were wealthy and you could afford it, you had painted walls, statuary, and mosaics on the floors. And I love this picture of them laying a mosaic floor. Can you imagine? And you know what a mosaic is? We did mosaics, right? We talked about mosaics.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Tiny tiles stuck together.
Tiny tiles stuck together to make a gorgeous picture. If you can afford it. Not everybody is affording that. So let me just peek in here because I marked some things that I wanted to make sure to talk about. Oh, I wanted to ask you guys about this quote. This is Cicero talking.
Hopefully it's in our book.
He's what?
Hopefully it's in our book, I said.
Yeah. Well, we've only had that one thing so far that wasn't. It says it's on a. I don't know that it would. It's on page 291 in my book, but I don't know that it is in yours. Cicero is talking about life in Rome. And if you live in Rome and it gets hot in the summer and kind of smelly and people start getting sick and you have the money, what do you do?
I remember this part. I think you like leave the city and go somewhere else.
You leave the city and you have a country estate.
Yeah.
You have a villa, a farmhouse, which isn't just a farm. It can be a really nice
Isn't there also a seaside
place.
villa too?
And a seaside villa. Or if you're lucky, you have all 3. You have a country estate, a seaside villa, and But Cicero was talking about this, and he said this is what it's like to go back to the place of your forefathers, because a lot of these people, their country estates, if you were from a noble family, they may have lived on that estate for generations. Yes.
Was he the one that was it? He said, "Just look at this country house."
Yes, that's
see
the
that?
little instant thing. I want to talk about that in a minute. And so I don't know, do you guys have a place like that? I mean, where your family has lived for generations, or like how long has your family been in the U.S.? How many generations do you know?
No, they just came here actually in like the year 2000.
Oh, well, so their home is in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Their country, the place of their ancestors. What about you? Do you have a place like a family farm or something like that?
My grandpa, after his father and grandfather, I think it was his grandfather's great grandfather. Anyway, I think it was his great grandfather, was from Paris. His house was the second one built It was the second closest house to the Eiffel Tower. So it's a very old home. It is now like property, it's like a museum or something. But then my grandpa came to the United States, and then after World War II he married Evelyn and then started a farm. No, that was before. In his childhood they had a farm in northern Illinois that was built when his great-grandfather came to the United States.
There's property in southern Illinois that my family, in two directions, through my grandpa and through my grandma, have been farming for 150 years. And the house that I knew of as my grandma's and grandpa's house was actually built by my great-grandparents. And so for my dad, it was grandma and grandpa's house. And then they moved to town. And then my grandparents moved into it the year I was born. And so I always went there as grandma and grandpa's house. And I always like to walk around. You know, my great-grandparents had chickens. There was a chicken house, and then the grandpa always kept the pigs in it when they littered. And he would help me to go in there and see the new litters and see the baby pigs. But just walking around and realizing that generations of my people stood here. And so Cicero was talking about something like that. When you're in Rome, it's not necessarily true. You know, things burn down, things get rebuilt. But he goes out to his country estate and he says, "Here is the ancient stock from which we are sprung. Here are our sacred rights. Here our kindred. Here countless traces of our ancestors. Just look at this country house. You see it as it is now, enlarged by the care of my father, who, having weak health, passed almost all his life here in literary pursuits. But in this very house, I must tell you, when it was a little old-fashioned cottage, I was born. And so there is some sort of lurking feeling and fancy, which seems to make me take a peculiar pleasure in it. And why not?" Now here's the line I wanted to ask you about. "When we remember that the wise man of old is said to have rejected immortality, that he might see Ithaca once more." What is he talking about? You read the story. The wise man of old rejected immortality so that he might... Odysseus. Well done. He was holed up with Calypso, the goddess, and she, "If you will stay with me, I will make you immortal." I miss my wife and my family. I miss my home of Ithaca. I don't want to be immortal. I want to go home. I want to go home. And so home draws us. I remember I was in my 20s, as I was already married. And so Grandma and Grandpa's house, there was their farm. And then just half a mile up the road, there was a green house up on the top of a hill. It was just always there. Like, I never asked about it. I never was told anything about it. It's just the neighbors, okay? And you had to drive down that highway to go to my aunt and uncle's house. And we were driving down the highway once, and I was sitting in the back seat. And Grandma just suddenly says, "You know, my dad built that house." What? I'm 20, whatever, and you never told me? "Yeah, that's where I grew up. My dad built that house." And Grandma, why did you never tell? It never occurred to me to tell you. And they've torn the house down now. But then I looked back, I have a picture of my grandma really, really young, looking out the window, and it's that house. And her dad is in the front. Okay, I get it. Grandpa's family lived here. Grandma's family were the next door neighbors. So that whole area was belonging to my family. Anyway, there's something about home, you know, that Americans don't have so much because we are a nation of immigrants. And so we don't, most people don't farm for generations in our country anymore. So most people don't have a place you can go to and say, "Yeah, my family came here in 1850 whatever and, you know, settled this piece of land."
My grandpa was kind of like, quote unquote, the mayor of the area, because He was like that friendly guy who would help out.
Yes.
He was an engineer from, I believe he went to University of Illinois.
Hmm.
But he was an engineer, and he would fix people's tractors for them. He actually got enough parts in the 70s. He went back to his farm and built a Ford tractor.
Cool.
The Model 73. Huge one.
I had you read about their clothes. We have a lovely graphic here of the putting on of a toga. They described it, and it was kind of hard. I'll show you guys one at a time. But here's the toga. You know, they talked about it as being like half a tortilla. But it's huge. It's 18 feet across. And it's 7 feet tall. And then you have to drape it around you in a certain way. They're talking about tunics. And the lady's wearing a tunic and then the stola over it. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like
I saw this.
Yes, and this is the shape of the toga when it's all spread out, and you have to wrap it around you. Pants aren't very comfortable. Pants just aren't very comfortable. We should revive the whole just wrapping robes around ourselves and.
I always thought that was kind of cool, though.
I feel like we should revive that. I had you, let's see. Oh, and amusements and games. The only thing I marked that I thought was really remarkable here, the Colosseum held 87,000 people. Like, this is modern class stadium size. I don't know how many people does the Mark hold. No, they don't call it the Mark anymore. The Mark was a stupid name, and I refuse to call it its new name. That's even stupider. Sorry. I am anti people sponsoring buildings and getting it named after them. We'll call it the Moline Civic Center. Do you have any idea how many people can fit in there? I have no idea. I don't think 87,000. I went to see Elton John there. I don't know how many people went to see Elton John there. This is a huge, very modern class size. And then there was a picture in your book that it's just a drawing here of the hippodrome. Hippos, means horse in Greek. And so the hippodrome is where they do the chariot races. And there was a huge one at Constantinople. So the chariot races were very, especially in the later empire and in over in Constantinople, the chariot races were like modern teams, okay? So it wasn't individual charioteers so much as teams, and they were by colors. Eventually it just was down to the greens and the blues in Constantinople. And riots broke out if your team didn't win. Sort of like, soccer stadiums where sometimes riots break out now in soccer games. I'm not a sports fan, so I just don't get it. But this was, again, a very modern, we think of these people, oh, it's 2,000 years ago, it's 1,500 years ago, it's so long ago, but people don't change. They get all fired up about their sporting events, and when their people lose, or if they think the umpire has made a bad call or something, they get really, really bent out of shape. And they start yelling and throwing things, and it's just kind of funny to me that people don't really change. I wonder if there's a picture in here of a chariot race. Have either of you ever seen the movie Ben-Hur? No. Starring Charlton Heston. It is a very long movie, all right? But it has an awesome chariot race in it.
Oh, that's cool.
This is why I'm recommending it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that part of the movie.
Here we have the hippodrome. Here, and the chariot races. They go around, it's just an oval, of course, and they go around the oval. But as you know, like when you're turning that bend, they're about to run into each other and it gets ugly. It's a sharp bend. And I wonder if it tells how fast they go. It does not. Usually either 2 or 4 horses pulled each chariot. Sometimes special races were held with 6 or even 8 horses to a team. That's a lot of horses out there. 4 different teams. If you had 8 horses, 4 times 8 is 32. 32 horses running out there trying not to run into each other. It does not say. Maybe we don't know how fast they got.
I remember you talking about previously, one of the earlier classes, that people would like fight or beat you in the back of an alley if you were against the team that you were on. I don't remember.
It was particularly in Constantinople later, and actually, so.
Was it because of the Olympics? I think it was also that.
No.
Teams? No.
No. This was because this was not even in Greece. It was in Constantinople. A big riot broke out, and over the greens and the blues. I don't remember, in the 500s. No, because it had to be around the year 400 because St. Ambrose is involved. And they rioted and they killed the governor. And the emperor, Theodosius, I think, was emperor at the time. And he went and he killed a bunch, like he just massacred people. And then he tried to go to mass. He tried to go to church, and St. Ambrose like, no, I'm not giving you communion. You just massacred a bunch of people. You will repent. You will confess and repent and do penance before I allow you to take communion. It got ugly. It got ugly, but again, sometimes it gets ugly now. Fortunately, our leaders do not go massacre the city if it gets ugly. And then you read a little bit about gladiator fights. You probably know a lot about this. We saw in the Eagle of the Ninth, Esca fighting in the ring. You probably know that there's man versus animal, man versus man, and man versus man in a bunch of different ways because depending on what you're equipped with. Whether you've got the net, whether you've got the spear, whether you've got the sword. They all get the name gladiator from gladius, sword, even though they don't all have a sword. And that they were slaves. It says Trajan presided over a show that lasted 117 days. 90 days would be 3 months. 3.5 months in which 10,000 gladiators took part. Many of whom did not live through this, obviously. That's amazing. Amazing, not in a good way. You know what I mean? Is that just imagine if the president decided we were going to have a 3.5 month public party. And 4th of July is going to last for 3.5 months this year. And we're going to have public parties and public exhibitions every day. I can't even imagine. Just for your benefit, Addison, Bailey is snoring over here on the floor, and it's making me want to laugh. Okay, then we read about education, which you already did a paper on. And just a second. Let me see why I marked this. Okay. Who were most of their teachers? Who were the best teachers? Greeks. How did the Romans feel about Greeks?
They felt okay with them actually, as like slaves or something like that.
They felt okay with them as slaves, but not as equals in any source. And I don't remember where she said it, but she said they tended to look down on the Greeks as a people, but admire their philosophy. Although, did everyone think that these newfangled Greek teaching ideas were a good thing for Romans?
No.
You remember Cato?
Mm.
Cato, this Cato is, well, there's 2 Catos, and I wonder which.
That's the one that said Carthage.
He'd have to be, yeah, he's probably that one.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not think this was good at all. What is dangerous about being really good with words?
you could twist someone. Like, since they're conquered, they might want to turn their children against them to be non-patriotic.
Yeah. So we're going to conquer Canada, and we're going to enslave Canada, and then let the Canadians teach our children. See, I get it. What are the Canadians going to say about the United States? Oh, it's a terrible imperialistic country that is mean to people. And
start
yes.
talking smack.
Now, I don't know that the Greek slaves did that necessarily. Remember, last semester we read The Fox was a Greek slave, didn't he? And I think a lot of situations you had a private tutor in your home, and it was like that. He wasn't happy to be enslaved, but we didn't see him. He came to love his young charges, his students, you know, and cared for them, to the point where even when he got old and freed, he chose to stay. But they had great skill with words, and in Rome, you know, if you wanted to get ahead, just like in Greece, there was a lot of public speaking involved. If you're a senator and you want to persuade them to do what you think is right, then you need to be good with words. And so people started seeing that, Romans started seeing that this was a good thing. However, I love this quote. After much meditation, said Cicero, himself one of the greatest of Roman orators, I have been led to the conclusion that wisdom without eloquence is of little use to a state, while eloquence without wisdom is often positively harmful and never of any value. I'm just going to read this again. Wisdom without eloquence is of little use to the state. I can have tons of wisdom. I can see clearly what we need to do as a society, but if I can't put it into words, no one's going to listen to me. While eloquence without wisdom is harmful, because like you said, I will twist words to get my way. I will persuade people to do what I think is right, but I'm not right. Interestingly, the guy who started the Institute for Excellence in Writing, that we've done a lot of their exercises, says basically the same thing. He said, a good idea poorly expressed is less powerful than a bad idea expressed well. If you have a bad idea but express it well, it's going to be influential. But you can know the truth but express it poorly and people will not listen. So if you ever wonder why I make you write, or your parents make you write, or your parents send you to debate class, or whatever they do, it's because if you have the truth, and if you know the Lord, you do have the truth, but you can't express it, it's not of value. So, and she said something else interesting, I think. The Greeks were conquered in 146 BC, and that Greece was no longer its own. But I'm going to read the whole paragraph, actually. It's only the end of it that I'm interested in. But in thinking of these Greek slave teachers in Rome, it must be remembered that in those days, slaves were nearly always prisoners of war, and that they were often well-born, well-educated, and high-minded persons. Do you know what? This was before Roman time. Plato was actually captured in Sicily and made a slave briefly. Plato. If some of their ideals were different from those of the great Athenians of the 5th century BC, it must also be remembered that great changes had come to Greece. The Greek had been conquered, and the loss of his freedom had hurt his soul. Nevertheless, slave as he was, he had great things to give to his Roman pupils. And this is the part I highlighted. History has shown again and again that true greatness is born of suffering. If that wondrous civilization brought into being by the Greeks was to endure, it needed the discipline, strength, and sternness of the Roman character. Think about last semester. What do you remember about the relationships of the Greek cities with each other?
They're not good. They're not united.
They never got along. They're always fighting, to the point where we have Athens and all her allies fighting against Sparta and all her allies for 27 years. It's a really long war. I'm actually reading, for next year's high school, I'm reading the book that we're going to read about the Peloponnesian War. And it's just brutal. And I just read it and I think, people, if you would just stop attacking each other. And I don't mean Sparta versus Athens. I mean, in the meantime, they're individual towns fighting each other in the middle of a bigger war. This was going to collapse. It was just going to, it couldn't be maintained. But they suffer, they're conquered, and then the Romans take what's beautiful there and they pass it on to the world. They don't invent it. They pass it on to the world. The Greeks became a different sort of person when you suffer. I suppose America became a different sort of America after the suffering of the Civil War. And I'm not even talking about freeing slaves or anything, just the group suffering, you know, that made us a different, maybe sterner people. I don't know. Maybe sadder people.
I'm glad the Union won, because if they still kept tradition from, like, having slaves today, it would be horrible.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we still would. I think it would have gone. I think it would have gone away gradually. But that is another comment. But yes, I think nobody is not happy that there are no slaves. However, this is an aside, but we have plenty of time. What? Oh no, I'm not going to go there. Never mind. That's just completely a different can of worms. But I'm going to talk about the martyrdom of Polycarp. But for next week, I would like you to read chapters 17 and 18. Okay, it's roughly 27 pages or something like that. It is like a day in the life of a Roman, sort of that sort of thing is chapter 17. We talked about the education, we talked about what they wear, but what do they do all day? If you were a Roman man, your average Roman guy, you're not poor, you're not a slave, you're just a free Roman citizen, what does your day look like? And then chapter 18 is about famous writers, one of whom we've talked about, Virgil, who wrote the Aeneid. But I wanted us to read those two chapters that we skipped going through earlier. So read those, no reading questions, just read and put yourself, when you read chapter 17, just imagine you're there. Just let your imagination go. What would life have been like? What about your imagination, Colin?
Let your imagination run wild.
Let your imagination run wild. Maybe not run totally wild, but within the context of what she's describing.
Let it run with a leash.
Let it run with a long leash tethered to Dorothy Mill's book. And that will be our final reading of the year. Neil, I saw your martyrdom of Polycarp. Did I see that? Can I have it so I don't have to look it up on my computer? I actually have it in a book, but I didn't bring my book.
I have mine too.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Neil wins. I don't have a supplementary reading prepared for you. It's just going to be a really easy week. But I do want you to sit down and spend some time with those questions and really just give it your best shot to think of everything you can think of. You can browse back through anything we've read, like I said. So Polycarp was the bishop of Smyrna, and Polycarp knew John. He knew the apostle John, which is just amazing. And then there was the next link, not Ignatius. Irenaeus, yes, Irenaeus, knew Polycarp. So he's one, thank you. I knew Ignatius. I knew it started with a vowel, but I knew Ignatius was wrong because Ignatius is the same time period. So for several generations, you know, we have that link to the apostles, which just must have been amazing. So was this, you knew, I mean, had you read this before?
Which one?
The martyrdom, account of the martyrdom of Polycarp?
No, but I've read other martyrs, yeah.
Okay. One of the first accounts of a martyrdom. Bishop of Smyrna. Smyrna is in Turkey. It's one of the churches that in the book of Revelation that gets written to the church in Smyrna. I wish I brought my book because it's hard to find stuff. The writer of this account of the martyrdom starts out with other stories of martyrdom. Some were torn by scourging until the mechanism of their flesh was seen even to the lower veins and arteries, and they endured so that even the bystanders pitied them and mourned. Some even reached such a pitch of nobility that none of them groaned or wailed, showing to all of us that at the hour of their torture, the noble martyrs of Christ were absent from the flesh, or rather that the Lord was standing by and talking with them. The fire of their cruel torturers had no heat for them, for they set before their eyes an escape from the fire, which is everlasting and never quenched. We have the example of a Germanicus here, that he dragged the beast toward himself. Quintus is one who gave in. But it makes you wonder, I mean, it must be true that at that moment you're not completely there, or God is shielding you, because people endured such things that you just can't endure. Do you know what I mean? Like, and when Jesus said to the apostles, don't worry about what you're going to say beforehand, because the Holy Spirit will give you the words. I wonder if it's don't worry about how you will endure it, because you will be given the power to endure it if you're willing. But Polycarp was 86 years old, or at least 86 years old, and he had this dream about his pillow caught on fire, and he suspected he was going to be burned alive. What was the attitude? Okay, first of all, what was the attitude of the crowd when they brought him forward?
They sort of felt bad for him.
Well, initially they were shouting, bring us Polycarp, bring us Polycarp. But yeah, when they see this old man, and especially the governor, like, oh, you're old. Just do it. Just do it. And then there's the famous, I love, in my version, I wonder what it says in yours. It says the atheists. I like that one better. Yes, when he says, just give the pinch of incense to Caesar and say, away with the atheists, which they mean Christians. Christians are the atheists because they don't believe in the Roman gods. And he just motions to the crowd and says, away with the atheists, which just ticked him off. But it's awesome to have the presence of mind to do that. The fire will not burn him. It envelops him like an oven baking bread. Why bread?
Because it burns, like gets cooked.
Yeah. What else? Why is bread special for Christians?
Because it rises.
Yes.
And because of the host.
And because of the
Jesus
host.
Christ and communion.
All right. So he's almost a Eucharistic sacrifice. And they said smells, pleasant smells came out. When you see an 86-year-old man that we would consider at that point, you're maybe slightly frail, and maybe you just don't have the physical endurance anymore, when he's able to endure, what does that do for the rest of the Christians?
It encourages them.
He can do it. Mm-hmm. He's an old man and he can do it. I can do this. We have Perpetua and Felicity. We have women who are, sometimes there are very, very physically strong women, but for the most part, most women are weaker than most men. I'm sorry, it's true. It's not politically correct, but it's true. That's why they have different sporting events for men and women. the women can do it. I can do this. The children can do it. I can do it. And so you have those stories, which I know both of you are aware of, that even the guards are moved to become Christians and sometimes are executed right alongside the ones that they were sent to execute. It is amazing. But like we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Constantine, we have a different system. It's not dangerous anymore, and that's a good thing. But it's a bad thing too, because the people tend to be weaker in their faith, maybe. And I think that we can all three sit at this table and say, you know, we certainly don't want to be burned at the stake for our faith, and none of us knows how we would react. That's why we pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, right? We don't want to have to find out. Paul says, pray for your government, because they're the ones who make you able to live in peace. Okay. Do you guys have any, we're very short today. Do you have any other comments? All right. Well, Addison, we're just going to shoot the breeze here. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off. You have a shorter video. Yes.
Can I look at this book?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And we hope to see you next week. I need to plan something cool for next week, because we're going to have a short class again if I don't. Next week, Jeopardy! Greece and Rome Jeopardy! I'll plan it. I'll make the questions. I'll assign, and I'll even get awards. All right? Jeopardy next week. All right. See you, Addison. And I'm praying for your aunt. Bye-bye.